It is 7th of the 7th, 2020. This is actually a format that Americans and the rest of the world can agree on. I'm going to try and make this video quick because I was triggered earlier today during of all things, a fucking Tinder debate. I was asked, what do you do? And I mentioned, I'm on some podcasts, I run a fintech company. I like doing some writing about things like Bitcoin economics, society, free markets, etc., etc. And I get this message back saying, hey, that's the kind of stuff I'm interested in. And here I am thinking, sweet, maybe there's a person with a brain on the other side. Not to say everyone I match with on Tinder is stupid, but I've had some strange experiences. So anyway, we start getting into this conversation, and then I make the point that I'm interested in economics, and not the mainstream format of economics that's taught in universities and in the mainstream media today. This sort of Keynesian modern monetary theory, postmodern bullshit about giving up your agency and empowering an institution that has some sort of moral, ethical, and economic higher ground to make decisions for us, and in the process enrich themselves at the expense of everyone else. So I kind of framed up the essence of economics that I'm interested in, which is the study of human action and our individual allocation of our two most precious resources, which is time and energy. And she pulls up something about Milton Friedman, and I said, look, his was 10% of the way, but he had some really inconsistent logic around how he liked to frame things, and I explained that I'm not a big fan of him, and particularly not a big fan of morons like Keynes and his fellow Keynesians like our friend Paul Krugman, or Krugwoman, whatever the hell his name is. So anyway, that sparked an interesting debate where she started talking to me about how the world's fucked up because big corporations are the problem, because they can amass wealth and create these massive inequalities, and that consumers are fundamentally stupid and they don't know what they're buying, why they're buying it. They're manipulated through marketing. But basically, this is the form of the argument she was trying to make, and she was saying that we should mandate that monopolies and large corporations can't be formed. Now, in the process of making this argument, she was obviously advocating the idea that another monopoly, so a state-based monopoly, would be the one in charge of regulating who can and cannot be a monopoly, and who can and cannot do what based on their definition of what's right. Now, she then proceeded to tell me that the free market hypothesis, supposedly, and the idea of that the market solves things and that that it can naturally rebalance has been disproven, and further went on to say that money is just something we've made up as human beings, and oh man, I obviously got triggered starting to think, hold on, if you can't define money or the essence of why money exists, and if you can't delineate between the unit or the object or the the instrument that we use as money versus the natural emergent phenomenon that is money, that is the mechanism via which human beings collaborate and can build society, it goes to show how deep your thinking is. And we went back and forth on these arguments, and I wish, by the end of it, I kind of threw my hands up and said, look, if you're not going to want to understand what I'm saying and, what Bitcoin's role is in all of this, I said, I can't convince you over a Tinder message. I tried to send her some articles, one of mine, one of Robert Breedlove's, his latest one, the Mastering Slavery. And she kept coming back to the same point, which is, your viewpoint on central banking doesn't explain or doesn't address the issue of, you know, corporates amassing wealth and hoarding, right, and continuing to become rich at the expense of everybody else. And as much as I tried to explain that the very existence of large-scale corporates who no longer innovate is actually a result of central banks and governments being close enough to the monetary spigot and creating money, which is the resource via which, you know, the fabric of society is held together. They can create that out of thin air, and where it first flows is to funds, banks, and large corporates who can qualify for that kind of entry level money. And then where does that first flow? Onto the stock market and onto the bond market, and, you know, all the stuff that the Treasury buys, and then that helps strengthen and concentrate the wealth around, you know, those who are closest to, you know, those central banks and governments, and, you know, those who have control over the resource via which we measure society, via which we measure wealth. So that their existence is actually a function of that. You can't get such concentration in an economic system that is fundamentally free, and that means in an economic system where the money is also a free market form of money. Because in that kind of a system, what drives the accrual of wealth is adding value and continually innovating. Whereas what drives the continual accrual of wealth here is how close you are to the creation of the resource via which we measure and evaluate society, i.e. money. So they're two different worlds. And I couldn't seem to get that through to her head because in her mind, it was greedy corporates who, allowed to, you know, operate unhinged, would ultimately bring the world to its demise. And, you know, unfortunately, I tried to say, well, look, you know, there is a solution here with this thing called Bitcoin that creates a playing field that nobody can get a benefit from at the expense of anybody else, where nobody can have an unfair advantage. And if you start there, you're able to start to build a system upon which the right behaviors are more incentivized than the not so right behaviors. Now, you're never going to eliminate bad behavior from human society. You know, like, we're not fucking robots. And if you believe in some utopian, you know, Huxley Brave New World type of fucking society, you know, if you're some Silicon Valley monkey that wants to create that, you know, like Bellagio or something, you know, A, you're a moron, but B, you know, go for it because you're going to fail anyway. Alternatively, you could build a 1984 type society where nobody has any rights, you know, and you've got Big Brother and they control everything, etc. And, you know, that's obviously what the Chinese are trying to do and the North Koreans are doing, you know, Hitler tried as well and all that sort of stuff. So you've got those two divergent paths, which are effectively what centralized control leads to. You know, the idea of creating equality, creating stricter and stricter and stricter rules and regulations that some collectivist institution is able to, you know, endow upon the people, versus optimizing for a system that's a little bit messier, that allows, you know, freedom, innovation, lateral thinking, creativity, you know, life in and of itself. And that's the free market model. But the free market model can only work if everything is free. Particularly and most importantly, the money, the resource that all of this stuff is measured through. And yeah, she blocked my ass on Tinder. I mean, I'm fine with that. In fact, I think the best part of situations like this is that one day, I'm sure, she will remember and she will be perhaps still yelling at clouds for, governments to introduce more legislation to stop monopolies and make sure, the shale oil is not being dug anymore, or, greenwashing doesn't occur, or whatever the fuck other regulation she thinks that some other monopoly has the right to impose upon market participants. So yeah, she's most likely still going to be, yelling at clouds for the next 5 years, maybe even the next 10 years, until economic Darwinism, monetary Darwinism, until she another point that she made is humans aren't rational. Of course they're fucking not. Nobody's rational all the time. And the problem with these people is they don't understand nuance, so they think you're either rational or you're fucking irrational. But there's a spectrum, and human beings, as they grow, as they develop, as they mature, as they learn, it's kind of like a plane which leaves Sydney to go to LA. It's not 100% on that one line the entire way through. In fact, it's off course 90% of the time, and it's correcting along the way until it lands on a dime in the right position. And that's what human beings are like. That's what all natural systems are like. We are not above nature. We're not outside of nature. We are part of this holistic system. And these modern economists, quote unquote fucking economists, more like morons, they start with the assumption that human beings are not part of nature, that economics is a field that we just fucking made up, that money doesn't exist. So they start with a bunch of false assumptions, and then they try and create models with false assumptions that, that they somehow think are more logical than getting the fuck out of the way and allowing each individual, allowing a decentralized system to find its own mechanism of balance, its own equilibrium through the most intelligent method possible, which is the price structure, the method of delivering information through price through a free market monetary system. And I don't know, it was really funny because she, kept coming back to the point that I was the arrogant one who was who was refusing to think deeper when I was trying to define the base points of the argument, i.e., what is money, what is economics, how human beings self-correct along the way, and how getting the meddling out of the way and allowing businesses who do the wrong thing to fail. Because, another one of her points was how, if governments don't know what to do, what you're saying businesses know what to do. I said, no, fuck no. The businesses don't know what to do. Governments don't know what to do. Individuals barely know what the fuck to do, but most individuals at least have a semblance of what they want for themselves. And, when they get what they want, they might realize that it's not what they want. And, along the way, they find, more of what it is that they need. Now, that might not be so evident in today's world, where we have step by step removed personal agency and personal responsibility and individual responsibility. We've continually removed that from people, and we've replaced it with cushions, with rights, with this collectivist apparatus which makes decisions on your fucking behalf. To her, not credit, but I'll give her the benefit of the doubt that the human beings that you see on a day-to-day basis might not seem like that they can make intelligent, rational decisions for themselves. But trying to solve for that by taking away more personal agency, by taking away more personal responsibility, by enlarging the state and introducing more rules and regulations which some fucking bureaucrat might think they know better about, is completely antithetical. It makes the problem worse. Like how can you be so blind not to be able to see something as basic as that? And it's really funny because her argument was about, these big corporates, destroying the world, they're, doing this and that, and, they're enriching themselves at the expense of the masses, who she's trying to, like, sort of paint a picture about how the masses are important, but then at the same time, she's making the argument that the masses are a bunch of fucking morons who are too incapable of making a decision for themselves. So me, in my, fucking, self-endowed moral high ground, am right because I studied economics at university and, I somehow know what's better for everybody. What kind of an arrogant moron do you have to be able to make that kind of a presupposition? To make that kind of an assumption about people whilst trying to act like you give a shit about them. No, you don't give a shit about them. If you care about people, allow them to become stronger individuals. Allow them to take responsibility for the decisions they want to make in life. No, they will not know everything. Yes, they will be influenced by some form of marketing. But the more you allow people to make their decisions, the stronger their decision-making muscle becomes. And the more, the sharper, smarter, and more, I guess, what's the word? Responsible, I keep saying that same word, but the more like that they will become, and the more they'll be able to find other people who have similar values. They'll build values, they'll build ethics. We will build a society of strong individuals, as opposed to a society of a collective with all the power and all the moral, ethical, and economic high ground, controlling or, leading, or whatever the fuck you want to call that process, a bunch of weak sheep who can't decide for themselves. What kind of a world do we want to live in? Like the problem with a lot of these modern monetary theorists and the people who, think they've figured it out now because, free markets have somehow been debunked because, free markets don't work. We've seen what happened with the Great Depression. You fucking clown. The Great Depression happened after the Federal Reserve was instituted. If you take a moment to read history. When we start to meddle, let me come back to my point. The problem with these people is they don't have a consistent thread of logic. They don't have a set of values and an idea, like a thread of an idea that they can run consistently throughout their entire argument. They don't start with defining certain elements and then coming to a consensus and an accurate definition around what it is. Like, for example, what the fuck is economics? What the fuck is money? Why does it exist? Tell me, from an evolutionary standpoint, from an anthropological standpoint, and from an individual responsibility and ability to interact with others standpoint. Define the term first before you start creating, models and theories based upon a complete lack of understanding of what it is that you're talking about in the first place. So anyhow, I've ranted long enough. This was supposed to be 10 minutes, but it's almost 20. So I just find it really funny that some people can make these arguments, but I guess the conclusion to this thing is let them talk. Make your arguments, put them forward, see if you can have a civilized conversation, because, some of them may actually be open enough and humble enough to hear a viewpoint, that has some depth. But from my experience, most of them won't. So in which case, block, leave the conversation. Let them yell at clouds, let them hold their bags of fiat, let them believe that, their, righteousness and, their moral high ground is the way to go. Let them believe that they're dictators in their own minds, and continue stacking sats, continue accumulating Bitcoin, continue defunding the state, continue defunding these morons who will be left with worthless euros or dollars or pounds or whatever the fuck other, horse manure they're holding. Let them spend all their money, because, again, a lot of their theories are built around this idea that hoarding, in other words, saving, the accumulation of capital is somehow bad. but that everyone should spend because that's somehow how society should function. On a high time preference, like spend now, build now, rape and pillage now, as opposed to stopping for a moment, saving the product of your labor, and then finding something to invest it in that increases productive capacity and adds value to yourself, your community, and society at large. That's apparently a bad thing for these people. So anyway, do the right thing. Buy Bitcoin, educate yourself, get smarter, stay healthy, and let the cucks and the muppets and the intellectual yet idiots, continue running on their treadmill, because at some stage, someone's going to need to take the price of Bitcoin from 1 million to 10 million. It's going to be these guys, and that'll be so sweet. It'll be glorious. And again, I'm not in Bitcoin just to see the number go up, but I am also in Bitcoin to see the number go up, if you catch my drift. It's part of this revolution. The fact that we Bitcoiners and people with a little depth of thought and a bit of length of foresight will have the resources available to rebuild. I saw an interesting tweet on Twitter the other day saying, what happens after hyper-Bitcoinization? The best answer I saw was, we rebuild. Well, someone's going to have to rebuild. And fortunately, that is us. So thank you again for listening. Share, like, subscribe, do all that sort of stuff. And I'm going to go on another rant tomorrow, but appreciate you listening to this. And I hope that this format of discussion is useful. I hope there was some bits of information that you could pull from that that you could use for arguments elsewhere. And when I say arguments, I don't mean bashing someone. I mean a discourse, a discussion. And I'll see you at the next episode.